So welcome everybody. My name is Rob Winkler, and I'm the Vice President for Magic for 2021. And we are pleased to have you today for this presentation from Holly Torpey for GISCorps. We're going to get to her in just a minute. I've just got a couple of quick announcements just to let you know about a couple things we've got coming up. We're continuing our webinar series for the foreseeable future. As long as this pandemic is around. So my colleague on the Magic board, Michelle Field, who's with us, you can probably see her in one of those little squares, has been booking speakers for us. We've got one coming up next month on February 17th. That's another Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And there'll be announcements coming out via email and social media. This next one's going to be, we'll have a speaker from FEMA to talk about their advanced analytics for supporting disaster operations. And then in March, on St. Patrick's Day, no less, another Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we'll have George Helene and Zan Fredericks from USGS talking about the LIDAR program in Tennessee and the 3D elevation program. And I imagine we'll have more to announce for after that. Also, we are seriously moving toward having an in-person conference this year in November, like we have done in years past, except for this most recent year because of COVID. So look for an announcement on that soon. We're looking to lock in a venue, hopefully in the next couple weeks. I guess the only other announcement would be a lot of people have asked us about membership. Those of you who have been around for a while remember we used to have a $35 membership, and then we kind of changed it to where it was just a conference registration, and your conference registration got you a year's membership. And then we didn't have a conference last year, so people are like, "How do I become a member?" And we're like, "We don't know yet." So we're moving towards having a way for you to do a membership on our website, and look for details about that coming in an email soon as well. And then we'll go back to our model where, a 1-year membership gets you admission to the conference without having to pay for an additional conference fee. Okay, so that's the announcements. And without further ado, let me introduce our speaker for today. We've got Holly Torpey. She is a GISP, and she's the part-time program coordinator for GISCorps. She's also an active volunteer for GISCorps, and as well as another organization called kiva.org. Holly has a master's in GIS and technology from University of Southern California. And she has a background in natural resources management. And she is coming to us live today from Long Beach, California. Please welcome Holly. Thank you for joining us, Holly.
Thank you, Rob. I'm excited to be here. I'm always happy to talk about GISCorps and promote it with a new audience. So I'm really happy to be here. So let me jump right in. What is GISCorps? So GISCorps is a volunteer-driven nonprofit that was founded by Sheree Elhami in 2003. That's Sheree right there in the center of that picture. She was featured in the Women in GIS book, and this picture was taken when she was signing copies of it at the 2019 Esri User Conference. Sheree's idea was to match volunteers with GIS skills with nonprofit organizations that would benefit from short-term GIS support, especially in the wake of natural disasters, humanitarian crises, and situations like that. So to date, since 2003, we've launched 310 missions and completed 255 of them. And we've got 25 to 30 in the works right now. So that means we've got a completion rate of about 90%. So 90% of the missions that we launch, actually, we follow through to completion. And the other 10%, sometimes a mission might get abandoned for a variety of reasons, but most of the time they are completed successfully. Let's see, so since 2003, we've filled over 2,700 positions and volunteered more than 82,000 hours to support our partner agencies. So who are our volunteers? We've got more than 7,000 GISCorps volunteers in our volunteer database. So our volunteer database is just a database of all the volunteers who have signed up to be GISCorps volunteers. It doesn't mean that they've all actually worked on a project, but they're all just interested in working on a project. And they each complete a short volunteer profile where they list their relevant skills and subject matter expertise. And then when we get a partner organization who comes to us and requests volunteers to support them, we're able to query that database for the volunteers who have the skill set that they're seeking. And then we email the opportunity out to all those volunteers, and then it's up to them whether or not they want to participate or apply for the position. We have two kinds of projects. Two main categories. One is projects where we actually go through a selection process and people submit their resumes and we conduct interviews and we select the most qualified candidate for the job. And usually those are matching just one or maybe a few volunteers with a partner agency, and then they work directly together over the course of usually a matter of months, volunteering between a couple of hours and maybe up to 10 hours a week to achieve the objective that was laid out in the beginning. And we try to be really careful about defining those objectives very specifically so that a volunteer knows what they're committing to when they sign on to a project. And then if the partner organization wants to expand the scope of the project, then we ask them to create a separate job description and we do another recruitment unless that volunteer wants to take part in the other, the expanded scope of the project. So, oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about the two types of projects. The second type is typically our disaster response projects, and those are open to anybody who wants to participate most of the time. So we'll send out an email to all the volunteers who have the minimum requirements, and then anybody who wants to participate can jump in and do so. And in our email, we send out usually a sign up link, and then once they sign up, we create any accounts necessary for them, whether it be on an ArcGIS online organization or in our Slack workspace. And then they're all able to jump in and contribute. So those projects are great for people who aren't sure how much they can commit because they can do as little or as much as they want. And they're also great for people who maybe are just getting started in their GIS careers or who are still GIS students because they're open to anybody and they don't have to compete through a competitive selection process to get chosen for the role. So back to my slide, I got a little off track. Of those 7,000 volunteers, the vast majority are in North America, with over 4,700 of them being in the United States. But we do have volunteers, like I said, in 130 different countries. So of those American volunteers, 60 of them are in Tennessee, 18 in Arkansas, 20 in Mississippi, and 11 within 100 miles of Memphis. This is according to my volunteer database, and so if people's profiles aren't up to date, then I might have missed a few people in that count. But those are the numbers. We want to know, who are these volunteers? What kind of people are GISCorps volunteers? And it's a really wide range. So besides coming from different countries and different walks of life, the volunteers also represent a really broad range of GIS experience and expertise and subject matter experience. So the first one in the top left here is Banu, and she's originally from India, but she lives in Canada now. And these are all volunteers that have agreed to be profiled in our newsletter. So they're all on our website, and all this information is on our website. So I'm not sharing personal information that they didn't agree to share here. But anyway, Banu has, she has degrees in computer science and GIS, and she works for city government as a GIS specialist, I think. And so she brings a lot of experience to GISCorps, and she was selected for one of those more selective projects to do a hub site for an organization that collects family history for underrepresented populations. I'm going to talk about that one a little bit more later on. And so then next to Banu is Keith. And Keith is entirely self-taught. He doesn't have any formal GIS education, but he became interested in GIS on his own and became especially interested in using GIS for disaster response. And so he saw GISCorps as a great way for him to continue building his skills and gain some more practical experience. And he started working on those large crowdsourcing projects, especially the photo mappers projects that I'll talk about soon too, where we geolocate photos that we source from social media and news outlets, usually during hurricanes and other natural disasters. And we map them to provide situational awareness for emergency responders and emergency managers. And so Keith joined those projects and became an absolute standout volunteer, and we think he's completely indispensable. And then he was selected for one of those more selective projects that has an interview process, because he had proven himself to be so amazing in those other crowdsourcing projects. So now he's also on the Fire Mappers team, which is a smaller group of about 25 volunteers who map wildfire starts all across the country. And that one takes a little bit more expertise. So we were selective with that one, and Keith was one of those volunteers. And then next in the bottom left, we have Conrad. And Conrad has a background in using GIS in the military. He also has a master's degree, and he's got an impressive resume. So Conrad brings lots of experience and expertise to GISCorps, and he really, he started out on the campfire QA/QC project that we did for the terrible fires that affected Butte County in California in 2018. And he was, again, an outstanding volunteer and put in more work than we could possibly believe. I remember vetting his work, like, is this guy really, like, he's done so much work, it can't be high quality, but it was. He's just super productive and efficient. And so we approached him after that project to see if he was interested in filling one of our core committee positions. GISCorps is managed by an up to 9-member core committee who oversee each project and also manage the day-to-day operations of GISCorps. And Conrad agreed, and he was elected to our core committee. So he's become a truly valuable member of our team as well. And then we have Maggie, who is another Canadian volunteer, who she was actually selected through one of those selective interview processes even while she was still a GIS student. She was still getting her bachelor's degree, but she had the skills that we needed, and she had worked on other projects that showed that she was really innovative and resourceful. And that was what we needed for that particular project, because it was a project that integrated smart sheets with a map interface, and it wasn't something that anybody we knew how to do. We couldn't find any documentation on it. We didn't find any volunteers who had already done that. So we needed somebody who really knew how to figure out how to solve a complex problem and really innovate. And so Maggie turned out to be that person, and she did such a great job that she's now the IT developer and trainer for that partner organization that did that project. So moving on, who are these partner organizations that GISCorps helps? We have, in those years since 2003, supported 154 different partner organizations, and they specialize in a wide variety of subject areas, but the most common ones are listed here. So humanitarian aid, we see a lot of projects that are related to fighting hunger or distributing aid. So we have two that are ongoing right now. One is for an organization called Growing the Table in California, which is a consortium of different organizations that is matching community groups that are distributing food to people in California who have lost their livelihoods due to the pandemic. So it's matching those organizations with small growers in California who have who meet certain eligibility requirements, like they are either organic or regenerative, or they use regenerative farming practices, or they are minority or women-owned farms. So it's matching those farmers with the organizations that are distributing the food. And there's more to it than that. It's all on our website. And there's another one right now called Warehouses for Good, which is an organization based in Houston. And they are using GIS to identify underused or unused warehouses throughout the country where food can be stored that is destined for various food banks. So it's working on supply chain issues with food distribution. Environmental conservation is another topic that a lot of the organizations we support focus on. We've got a couple going on right now. One is a training project that's going to start on Monday, where 4 volunteers are providing virtual training to staff and instructors at Southern African Wildlife College in South Africa. And Southern African Wildlife College trains park staff from parks and protected areas all over Africa to use technology to support their missions of protecting and preserving different species and habitat in their protected areas. And Esri is providing for free their new ArcGIS online conservation solution to eligible parks throughout Africa. And so our role is training Southern African Wildlife College in using the ArcGIS, in using and administering ArcGIS online, and in particular the conservation solutions, so that they can then in turn train the park staff who will be the ones deploying those solutions at various protected areas throughout Africa. So that's a really exciting project related to environmental conservation. And another one is one that we haven't publicized yet because it's about to, the recruitment for it is about to go out in a few days. So if this interests you, you should sign up to be a GIScorps volunteer right now so you get that email. But it's for Sylvia Earle's nonprofit organization called Mission Blue. And it's focused on marine conservation. And they have identified areas of the ocean that either have exceptional species diversity or they're exceptionally degraded. So areas that either need special protection or special attention. And they've asked for help from GIScorps to create some applications for sharing information about those hope spots. They already have one interactive map, but they want to further develop that. So this volunteer is going to do a combination of application development and some training and some troubleshooting for some of the processes that they already have in place. Public health, we do a lot of public health projects. Right now, we've got this ongoing COVID-19 testing sites and now vaccination sites mapping I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. We've also done multiple polio vaccination campaigns. Another project I'll talk about in a few minutes is the Bangalore Health Data Project in India, which is an open source project. Cultural preservation, we've done projects recently in the last couple of years for an organization called the Train Campaign, which it was an application development project where the volunteer mapped historic train routes in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts. And another one is the One Shared Story hub site that I talked about a moment ago. And I'll go into that one a little bit further in a minute too. And then disaster response projects are a huge segment of what we do. Last year, we responded to 11 different hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and an earthquake just within the United States and its territories. And on those projects, like I said, we bring on lots of volunteers. There's lots of participation. Everybody's working together in a Slack channel and in a volunteer portal that we've built specifically for that purpose. In many cases, doing those, the geolocation of photos that I talked about, the volunteer Keith is such a standout at. And those are really fun and challenging because for a certain type of person, I happen to be one of those. It can be just really fun trying to precisely geolocate all these photos. So you have a photo and we're searching for clues either in the text of the accompanying post or in the news article or in the photo itself, like landmarks that you can identify or street signs or business signs that can be Googled. So you're trying to find the exact location of these photos and map them. And it's just, it becomes kind of addicting. And there's also a lot of camaraderie in the Slack channel as we work on those kinds of projects. And then we also do education projects. One example, it was for a nonprofit in Orange County, California called KidWorks. And these volunteers, 2 volunteers were selected to develop some curriculum. And then they worked with a group of kids after school. So these were high school students, I think, or perhaps they were even middle school students. But anyway, they worked with them after school. Together with the kids, they identified a problem. They went out and collected data. They developed an analysis and then an interactive map displaying the results of their analysis. So normally our partner organizations are nonprofits, but we also help government agencies and others in times of natural disasters, as long as the work isn't contributing to any kind of profit motive. We also make a point of not supplying volunteers for work that would otherwise be done by a paid employee. So often our partner organizations are nonprofits that don't have any budget for GIS staff, or maybe they have staff like Mission Blue, but they need some short-term support to build their GIS capacity. In the case of natural disasters, it's usually a question of filling a gap that just can't be filled quickly in any other way, where they can't ramp up fast enough to deal with whatever disaster they're facing. An example of that is the Camp Fire, which I mentioned that our volunteer and core committee member Conrad worked on this project. So the Camp Fire was a terrible wildfire that decimated the town of Paradise in Butte County, California. Butte County has a GIS staff, but they were completely overwhelmed after the fire with the amount of work that they had, and some of their own GIS staff had even lost their homes in the fire. So we provided a team of about 15 volunteers who worked closely with Butte County and with Esri's disaster response program, who developed this app really quickly for us to work in. So this team of about 15 volunteers all jumped into this application and worked together in a Slack channel to QA/QC and consolidate various surveys that had been done, damage surveys that had been done either by CAL FIRE or by the county using a couple of different applications. So we had like 3 different data sets for these same structures, each with different pieces of information that all needed to be combined and tied to a single correct point in order for them to file for FEMA aid. So we were able to provide, or these volunteers were able to do that QA/QC for about 19,000 structures and produce the data set that they need to get that FEMA aid that they so badly needed much more quickly than they would have been able to do otherwise. And this is a testimonial from Jim, who's the GIS manager in Butte County, and he told us there's no way that they could have gotten through all that data in anywhere near that amount of time. I think they did the 19,000 points in about 2.5 weeks. Okay, so where do we work? Since 2003, we've provided volunteers for projects in 94 different countries. The majority of our volunteers contribute their time remotely, with about 15% of missions requiring volunteers to work on site. And that percentage reflects the total percentage since 2003. But in reality, if you looked at that across across the years, across time, you would see that it's been declining each year. And in fact, in 2019, only 4% of our projects were on site. And not surprisingly, in 2020, none of them were on site. They were all remote. So what kinds of work do we do? You can see on this pie chart that data capture, data creation, that's our number one, by far the biggest type of project that we do. And those are a lot of those large crowdsourcing projects where we bring on lots of volunteers at once. One example would be the polio vaccination campaigns that we did in like 3 different countries in Africa. And for those, we built a special, I shouldn't say we, because I was actually only a volunteer at that point and I wasn't part of building the application, but the core committee built an application with a grid of squares, and then the volunteers would select a grid cell, and then within that grid cell they would carefully comb back and forth over satellite imagery and drop a point anywhere that they saw a structure, whether it was like a hut or anything else that could possibly be a dwelling. And then that data set was used by the World Health Organization to identify populations that they needed to reach out to and send crews out to vaccinate against polio. You can see that we do tons of other types of projects as well, whether it be needs assessments or training, or application development, spatial analysis, you name it. Any kind of GIS project, we do it, or we find the volunteer who can do it. And then I'm going to go through a couple of different projects that we've completed or are still working on recently. So this one is the COVID-19 testing sites data creation project. And this one's significant because of its scope and its size. It's almost 300 volunteers have participated in this project. It's been going on since March, when Esri's disaster response team identified a gap where local governments and sometimes state governments were publicizing testing site locations on their websites, but there was no nationwide data set for federal decision makers and analysts to use to assess capacity or allocate resources. So there was this gap in the data. They saw the need for a nationwide testing sites layer. So they asked us if we would take that on. So we quickly developed some applications. The one that you're looking at right now is our volunteer portal. It's got tabs across the bottom, and it continues to grow all the time. We're adding new tabs and new functionality, but this tab is where the volunteers actually add the testing sites. They only add testing sites that they can see that have been made public by either a government agency or the testing provider themselves. So they're not just posting something that they've only read about on social media or heard from their friend or something like that. These are all only testing sites that want their information shared. And then the end result of it is a few different applications. And the main result is the layer of testing sites, which now has more than 33,000 testing sites. And some state governments have used it as an additional source of testing site information for their state testing site maps. So California and Texas both, for example, have our data on their statewide testing site locator applications. And then this is a dashboard that we built. So this is kind of aimed at federal decision makers so that they can see the picture of the whole country at once and see the statistics. But you can also filter it by state or by test type or by status. And we also have a public testing site locator app that is available for anybody in the public to use to find a testing site near them, and they can filter it by whether it requires an appointment or what the test type that they want, whether it be a rapid test or a PCR test or an antibody test. And then this is all the volunteers who have contributed to this project, or at least all the volunteers who had contributed when I made this word cloud. You can see Jessica, whose name is in the middle, who is has the biggest font there. That's because she has single-handedly created more than 5,000 testing site points. She's amazing. Another significant, this is a series of projects, are our photo mappers projects. And so these are a partnership with the National Alliance for Public Safety GIS Foundation, NAPSIG, and also Cedar Digital Corps. And so the three of us work together to, whenever there's a significant storm or other natural disaster in the United States or its territories, volunteers go out and scour the internet for sources for pictures that are showing on the ground conditions in the affected area. So whether it be social media posts, public social media posts, or news articles, things like that, that have photos of on the ground conditions in real time. So we're looking at social media is especially useful for this because people are posting them right when it's happening. So they find these photos, they geolocate them, like I said, by looking for clues in the photo or in the accompanying text, and then they add them to a map. And this is our, the slide that you're seeing right now is our volunteer portal for those projects. It's built in Experience Builder, and it again has several different tabs with different apps embedded in it. And this is the app where they actually upload the photos using the Survey 123 form that you see on the right. And after geolocating them, they fill out some additional information and add the point. And then a team of we call them our admin vetters team, actually vets every single photo point before it's made public to make sure that everything was inputted correctly, because we have volunteers with various ranges of experience. Some of them might be new to the project and not have super carefully read the instructions, but so they make sure everything is formatted correctly and that it's a relevant photo. And then they add to it a one or more FEMA lifeline categories. And then they also assign a damage score to it, describing the damage level of the structures that are pictured in the photo, if there are any. And then all of that data ends up on this public dashboard, which is used by federal emergency managers and state emergency operations centers to evaluate the situation on the ground. It's an additional source of situational awareness for those folks. And some first responders use it as well. So this is the front of, or this is the first tab in that dashboard. It just shows statistics by lifeline and by damage score. And you can zoom in and out and click on points and see the photos associated with them. And then it has two other tabs that have attachment viewer applications, one by damage level and one by lifeline. And in these, as you zoom in on an area, the gallery of photos on the left filters to only the photos in the current extent of the map. So you can really see, and they're sorted by time. So the most recent ones are at the top. So these emergency managers who maybe haven't been able to get to the scene of the disaster yet can see at a glance what sort of damage is being reported in that area, and they can decide where they need to focus their efforts, what sort of, what kind of crews and equipment they need to send to that area, and just what to expect when they get there. Okay, so this is the Bangalore Health Data Analysis Project. This is a totally different type of project from those large crowdsourcing type projects before, where we have lots of volunteers. This one just had one volunteer. Her name was Nicole White. This is an open source project, and unlike most of our projects, it wasn't requested. The volunteer wasn't requested by a formal nonprofit or agency. It was actually a grassroots group of concerned citizens who had acquired this public health data that wasn't being used for anything, and they felt it was important to. They knew that spatial analysis would really make the data a lot more meaningful, and that they could use it to present to decision makers in their area. And so they asked for a volunteer who had the open source GIS skills to be able to analyze the data and visualize it for them. And so Nicole worked on it using QGIS, and she also used Excel spreadsheets over the course of about 3 months, and put together several different map projects for them to bring to the authorities that they were trying to make their case to. And then this is the other project that I mentioned earlier, the One Shared Story Hub Development Project. One Shared Story is a nonprofit organization in Virginia, and their goal is to make available, to find and make available sources of, like, unusual sources of family history data for populations and communities that aren't typically found in other types of historical records, the traditional types of historical records that you would look at if you were trying to find family history data, like census records and vital statistics. So we're talking about, for example, enslaved people who were not counted in the census, or who didn't have birth certificates and death certificates and other typical records like that. So people who are descended from enslaved people often have great difficulty finding any kind of family history information or tracing their family history because of the lack of those records. But there are other types of records that have either been passed down within families, or they're in non-traditional formats like maps, or written histories, or newspaper articles, or I don't know, lots of different sources. And so One Shared Story is focused on collecting that information and digitizing it, and transcribing it in some cases, and then making it available for people who are trying to research their family histories in those communities. So we selected one volunteer for this project, and that was Banu, who I showed you a picture of earlier. And she did this hub development. This is another page of the hub site. And worked closely with that organization over the course of a few months to put this together so that members of the community could collaborate on this effort and digitize these data sources and also access them. So what's it like to volunteer on a mission? So every time a volunteer finishes work on a mission, we ask them to fill out a feedback form, and one of the fields on there is a testimonial field that's optional, but we ask them, would you like to provide a testimonial that we can share with people about your experience? So this volunteer, Rebecca, highlighted how the sense of camaraderie that we often feel on those large scale disaster response projects. And I totally agree. Like, a lot of people have expressed that it seems wrong to say, but like they actually had fun working on this disaster project. And nobody wants another disaster to come along, but when they do, it's like, oh great, we get to work together again. And it also gives volunteers, I know the whole reason I first started volunteering with GISCorps, my first interaction with them was during Hurricane Harvey. And I had lived in Houston before, and I was frustrated at not being able to do anything to help, and I just wanted to do something. So I think I just Googled, like, how can I, help with my GIS skills? And I found GISCorps and started getting involved that way. And also with another group called Standby Task Force. But the ability to actually just do something to help, even though you're doing it for that other community, but really you're benefiting too, because if you have that desire, it's so frustrating to not be able to help in a situation when you see a need and you could do something. So it gives people who have that feeling like an outlet. It gives us a way to actually get involved and do something to help these communities that we care about. And then here's a quote from Banu, the volunteer who did the One Shared Story hub site. And she highlights the fact that when you're volunteering with GISCorps, you have not only you and the partner agency both have the support of the core committee. So each project has a core committee member who's the project manager. Sometimes they have more than one core committee member managing the project. But that person, even on a smaller project like this one, where we selected just one volunteer and then the volunteer works directly with the partner, the core committee is still there, checking in with both the volunteer and the partner, making sure that everything's moving along as expected, and that the volunteer has the support that they need, that they've been given all the information and access to software that they need from the partner agency, and that the partner agency is comfortable with the work being done by the volunteer. So there's always the core committee there to support both the volunteer and the partner throughout the life of each project. And then what are the benefits of volunteering? I already mentioned the benefit of being able to feel like you have been able to help, which to some of us is like a huge benefit. I mean, it's really gratifying to know that you're helping out in a terrible situation. And a lot of our testimonials highlight that fact, that they were just so glad that they were able to do something to help, and that they were able to use their skills in a meaningful way that actually made a difference. And this volunteer, William, highlights another benefit of volunteering with GISCorps, is that it allows you to often experience an aspect of GIS or a subject area where GIS can be applied that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. So you might work in local government and you spend most of your time mapping like parcels and utility lines, but then through GISCorps, you can suddenly be working on, a disaster response project or a humanitarian aid project. So it's fulfilling in that way. And it also allows you to explore different avenues. And sometimes, in some cases, it's led volunteers to say, that is really what I want to do all the time. And they end up making a career change. We had a volunteer named Jeff who stood up at one of our, at the Esri conference each year, when it's in person anyway, we have like a lunch meeting for GISCorps members. And volunteers can speak about their experience volunteering for GISCorps. And this particular volunteer, who has done a lot of work on multiple projects for GISCorps, he stood up and he said that GISCorps had literally changed his life. And then he went on to explain how he went from a completely unrelated field to working full-time for the World Health Organization in Geneva, and he's American. So he ended up getting to move overseas, work for them there, where he then met his fiance. So he was like, GISCorps literally gave me everything that I care about in my life right now. My career, my relationship, we do not guarantee that for anybody. In fact, that is extremely rare, but it does just open your, it opens your mind to different possibilities that you may never have thought of, and allows you to experience and experiment with different areas of GIS that you might not otherwise get to. So this particular volunteer that's on this slide, William, he's from Belgium, and he went to do capacity building for this organization in the Central African Republic. That was one of the on-site projects. So it's definitely in a setting that he might not have thought that he would have access to otherwise. And this volunteer, Shannon, she was one of I think 5 or 6 volunteers who worked on an ongoing set of projects for Mountain Rescue Association that does backcountry search and rescue training and collects data about backcountry search and rescue and analyzes lost person behavior and things like that. And she highlights the fact that that GISCorps can help expand your network. And that's true too, especially on those large scale disaster response projects or on smaller projects too, because you might make contacts within the nonprofit organization that you're supporting that you would not otherwise have gotten to know. And now you have this contact in this other field who can, who might prove to be an important connection for your career in the future, or provide a reference for you. And in the large scale projects where you have lots of volunteers working together, not only do you get to know, sometimes you get to know the partner agency people and the other core committee members who are managing the project, but often you also get to know all the other volunteers who are working on the project with you. And they come from all different places and they have all different GIS jobs, and it just expands your network within the GIS world. And then you might run into those people at a conference, or you might connect with them on LinkedIn or something like that. And it just helps build your GIS network. And then one other benefit to volunteering with GISCorps is that if you are interested in GISP certification, it's a way to earn your points for contributions to the field. So for those seeking a first-time certification, you get 0.05 points for each hour that you contribute. And for renewal, you get 0.15 points for each hour that you contribute with GISCorps. And current opportunities, if anybody's interested in what they could do right now, the COVID-19 testing and vaccination sites project is ongoing. And although we have had 300 volunteers contribute to that project, a lot of them have gone on their way because it's been so long. Like I said, most projects don't last this long. So we're always looking at bringing in new people when we find people who are interested in contributing to that project. And I'll show my contact information in a second, and anybody who's interested in that project can just contact me directly and I'll be happy to bring you on. The photo mappers projects are kind of an ongoing group. So anybody who, sometimes we just send out emails to people who have done those projects in the past, especially when we have really short notice and maybe we don't think it's going to be that big a project. So we'll just send it out to our existing photo mappers team. And so once you get on that list, then you always get notified about every subsequent project that they're going to be working on. And then every few projects, we send out a wider email to everybody in the database who has the minimum requirements, which is usually like being in North America or being in the United States and having ArcGIS Online experience usually. So if you're interested in being added to that mailing list, I'd be happy to do that as well. We also get asked to support humanitarian OpenStreetMap team projects periodically. So if you go to our website and you look at, there's a menu that says what we do, I think. But anyway, if you look at that one, you'll see there's a page for humanitarian OpenStreetMap projects, and you can click on that and see which projects we're supporting right now. And anybody can jump in at any time and work on those projects. And if it's a project that we're supporting, you can submit feedback when you're finished and get GISP, get a letter that documents your contributions for your GISP points. And then Mission Blue, I mentioned that project earlier. That recruitment's going to go out in the next few days. So if anybody's interested in that one, you'd want to sign up right away so that you'll get that email. And then becoming a GISCorps volunteer, what are the costs involved, the requirements, and the obligations? None. When you sign up to volunteer with GISCorps, the only thing that you're agreeing to is that you'll receive emails from us when we have opportunities that match your skills. So that's all. It just means that you're putting yourself on this, you're providing us with a profile that says what your skills are, and you can update that whenever you want. And then and you're agreeing that when we get a volunteer opportunity that matches your skills, that we can email you. That's the only obligation when you first sign up. So sometimes I hear people say, like, they'll email us and say, well, I'm not sure if I can commit to being a volunteer. I'm interested, but I don't know. I want to know more about it. And I always tell them, just sign up. It doesn't take anything to sign up. You're not committing to anything at that point, and it doesn't cost anything. And you don't have to be a URISA member either. However, if you get selected for a volunteer opportunity, then there are some commitments involved, especially if it's one of those opportunities that we interview for and you're the only volunteer on the that we have matched with that partner organization. And we really do expect you to fulfill the commitment that you make at that time, which is just to complete the work that you agreed to stay in communication with us and with the partner organization. And then at the conclusion of the project, usually the volunteer and the partner organization will collaborate to write a short report that goes on our website. And then you submit a feedback form and report your hours. And that's the extent of the commitment there. And then this is my contact information. I'm happy to answer questions right now, but also you can email me at that email address, htorpey@giscorps.org or info@giscorps.org. And then links to sign up to be a volunteer and also to request volunteers. If you represent a nonprofit organization that you think could benefit from GIS support from GISCorps, you're welcome to submit a request for volunteers as well. So I think that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. That was awesome. I don't know if you all saw, I put in the, sorry, my Holly's down behind me. Good timing. Anyway, I put a link in the chat for anybody that's interested in signing up for those emails about volunteer opportunities. I do get those emails. I've actually been on that email list for probably 6 or 7 years, I guess, back to when I was a student getting my master's in GIS. With my full-time job, I haven't had a chance to jump in on any of those. I keep waiting until my son, I wait until my son graduates from high school and I can move on from this county job and then maybe I'll have more time or something. But there's so many cool looking projects that come into my inbox that I wish I had time for. But anyway, that link is in the chat. It's all, it's also on the screen. But does anybody have any questions? I see some stuff coming into the chat here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me make sure that y'all have the ability to turn on your mics. I think you do. Otherwise, feel free to post a question in the chat. Oh wait, Holly, looks like we got a question here. How could someone with minimal GIS skills help?
Well, for projects like the photo mappers projects that I described, you really don't have to have any GIS skills to participate in those. It is in an ArcGIS online environment, but it's an application that's already been developed and really you're just filling out a form. So it's more a set of skills or personality traits for those projects that we're looking for. So we need people who will read the directions and follow them carefully. People who are really detail oriented, who won't stop until they figure out exactly where that picture is, and who will notice all those little clues that we look for in the photo that allow you to figure out where that photo is or where it was taken. Really that's it. You don't really have to, it's just that people who have a GIS background tend to be good at that kind of thing because they're interested in maps. They're great at looking at satellite imagery and being able to identify things on satellite imagery. And they tend to have that kind of detail oriented personality that can do sort of tedious work for hours at a time. But yeah, so anybody can participate in those. You don't really have to have an extensive background to work on the photo mappers projects. And same with the COVID testing sites. That one also, you're working in an ArcGIS online application using the smart editor widget, but you don't have to know how to configure the smart editor widget or how to set up the data or anything else. You just have to be really careful about vetting each site, making sure that you're finding the accurate information and inputting it carefully And that's really it. So we have a number of projects that are like that, where you don't have to have a lot of experience, but you do gain experience, and it gives you something to put on your resume too, that I've worked in this ArcGIS Online application, and, you know, I mapped all these testing sites. So it's a great way to sort of add some experience to a resume without having to start out with a lot of experience.
Okay. It looks like we have a couple more questions. There was a question here. Daniel Williams had a couple things here. The first one was, do we have GIS on our, oh, I see, never mind, on our PCs, or PCs?
Yeah, so the question is, do they have to have GIS software on their PCs to help contribute to GISCorps?
Yeah, it depends on the project. So some projects, if you're doing like a spatial analysis project that requires you to use either ArcGIS Pro or QGIS or something like that, then you'd need to have it installed locally. But for the projects that I just mentioned, like the big disaster response projects where we have lots of volunteers, it's all web-based. So you don't need to have any, you just need to have an internet browser, a good internet connection, and that's it.
And then there was one other question about QGIS. The question is, does that just depend on the NGO? I guess it just depends on, well, I guess how would you answer that?
Yeah, if we're helping a partner that doesn't have access to Esri software or has a preference for open source software for some other reason, then yeah, then I mean, we're software agnostic. A lot of our projects are Esri based, just because so many organizations use Esri and already have, a lot of nonprofits have access to an affordable Esri license. So we do a lot of work in Esri software, but we'll find the right volunteer to do the work in whatever software package the partner wants us to use. And in some cases, it might be up to the volunteer. Like, they want the spatial analysis done. They don't care how you do it. They want the end result. So then that could be, in some cases, it might be up to the volunteer to choose. Sure,
because if the end user can take a shapefile, we can use whichever software, right?
Right. We actually did a project like that recently for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It was a COVID-related project where they were using synthetic aperture radar to analyze changes in movement behavior after the lockdowns. So they needed areas of interest, and so they asked the volunteers to digitize parking lots from satellite imagery. So they were supposed to be digitizing all these parking lots at like retail locations, so that we could see if, or so that they could analyze it with the radar to see if the number of cars in those parking lots had diminished over time after the lockdowns were put in place. And so he created, the project manager, or the partner organization project manager, created shapefiles for all the areas of interest that he wanted people to digitize. And then the volunteers could just download, they downloaded them from a Google sheet, I think, that they were all working in. And then they could use whatever software they wanted to digitize it. They could do it on Google Maps, they could do it in QGIS, they could do it anywhere, as long as they sent back the data. The partner didn't care how it was done.
Yeah, now if only a QGIS had that dashboard capability, right?
I know.
All right, well, I don't see any other questions. So we've kept you all just about an hour here. It's just about 4. I know some of us probably need to get back to the work. So Holly, thank you so much for your time today, and for enlightening us on all this good stuff. You know, one thing that really stuck out to me, and just the opportunity to network with these kind of projects, is, you know, probably invaluable for some people. So like I said, I just wish I had more time to do something like that right now, this part of my career, but hopefully soon. So again, thank you all very much. Also, just a heads up, if it's okay with Holly, if it's okay with you, we usually post the recordings of these on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's fine.
So that should be posted by the end of the week, and then we'll send out an email and let you all know when it's up. And for all you out there in Magic Land, we'll see you next month, in February 17th, for the FEMA webinar. Everybody, thank you so much, and have a great day. All right, and we're signing out.